Thank you all for being here. For those of you who may be joining us or watching later, this is the Utah League of Cities and Towns Board of Directors meeting. Today's Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. We are at the Salt Palace Convention Center for part of our Local Officials Day. We appreciate all of you joining us and all of the board members who are here with us and everyone else participating. Thank you to all of our partners who are here. Minutes have been sent out. Is there anybody who's had a chance to review the minutes? We have our December 15th, 2021 and our January 5th, 2022 minutes that have been sent out. Anybody have any questions or concerns, or is there a motion to approve those minutes? Thank you. Motion by Mayor Shepherd and second by Mayor Silvestrini. Any discussion to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from December 15th, 21 and January 5th, 22, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. Welcome to our friends joining us online. We miss seeing you in person, but we hope you're well and appreciate you joining us. Thank you. Okay, conflict of interest forms. Everybody has one in their packet. So I'll just call for, if there's anybody who has a new conflict of interest that has arisen, the form is in there. We ask that you make sure and disclose that. And we'll just, if you have anything like that, you can submit it to the staff and turn it in there. Let's move on to our 2022 appointments to the ULCT. Okay, we're going to skip 3 and 4, thank you, and move to number 5 on the agenda. Because we really appreciate Representative Steve Waldrop being here with us. We appreciate him coming, and he's here right now, so we're going to jump to number 5. Representative Waldrop is the co-chair of the Commission on Housing Affordability, and he's doing a great bit of work, and he's really engaged with the league and wants to continue to engage with the league as we really look at the housing affordability crisis that we have here in the state of Utah. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Cam and then to Representative Waldrop. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, first things first, thank you, everybody. First things first, thank you to those in the room for joining us for Local Officials Day. Representative Waldrop, I'm going to quickly introduce the folks on the league board to you so you know who your audience is here. Starting from this end of the table, we have Mayor Troy Walker of Draper, Mayor Jeff Silvestrini of Mill Creek, who's also the first vice president, Mayor Mark Shepard of Clearfield, Mayor Logan Monson of Blanding, Councilmember Carrie Malkovich of Woodland Hills, Councilmember Kate Bradshaw of Bountiful, City Manager Gary Hill of Bountiful, who's here on behalf of the City Management Association, all the city managers in the state, Jessica Egbert, who's a council member from Mapleton, Mayor Ramsey, with whom you have sparred, with whom you have served in the different realms within the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. And then online you have Mayor Mike Caldwell of Ogden City, Councilmember Dustin White of Roosevelt, Mayor Holly Daines of Logan, Councilmember Mary Winch of Manti, Mayor Michelle Randall of St. George, and Mayor Mike Lanhard of Garden City. And then you have league staff and league friends and others around the room as well. This is a public meeting, just so that everyone's on the same page there. But I'm really excited and grateful that Representative Waldrop during the session is carving out some time to chat with the league board, not just about this session, but about the global vision of the Commission on Housing Affordability. For those of you who are new to the board, which is half the people on this board, Representative Waldrop came to the league board in May, and he and his co-chair, Senator Jake Andrigg, basically laid out a vision for the next steps of the Commission on Housing Affordability, where they said, we have this crisis. We all acknowledge there's a crisis about how we grow. And they extended an open invitation to cities to be at the table for dialogue within the Commission. Over the course of the last 8 months, that table has been open and there's been tremendous dialogue. And even if at times we don't always see eye to eye, Representative Waldrop has always been very responsive to the perspectives of cities. And I, Representative, put you in the big picture category of legislators as someone who's trying to look at how policy affects not just this session, but 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And I appreciate that. In November, the league staff participated in the Innovations on Housing Affordability up at the University of Utah. I was on a panel after a presentation by a researcher from the Brookings Institute, and that presentation is in your packet. Nick, will you scan down to that presentation in the packet for those who are online? So within the packet, you'll see that we gave you the presentation from both Brookings and from Salt Lake County, because that same researcher presented to the Commission on Housing Affordability 2 days after we met as a board and reviewed the outline of the Commission on Housing Affordability bill. So that was 2 weeks ago. We sat down with Representative Waldrop and walked him through all of the points from the league board of what you were comfortable supporting at this point, what you were concerned about, and what was still TBD based on the upcoming language. We sat down with him on January 7th about that. And likewise, on January 7th, Salt Lake County gave this presentation, and then the Brookings Institute researcher gave the subsequent presentation. In her analysis, she's done a lot of research comparing states around the country, all of whom in her research have growth challenges, and how state and local governments are tackling those growth challenges. My favorite part of her presentation was when she acknowledged there was no one-size-fits-all approach, and that every state had a different approach and was using different tools. And there were multiple reasons for that, but she kept emphasizing that point. That being said, she also outlined several key categories of what she was seeing around the country, with different legislatures taking a more active role in land use planning around housing. So I wanted you to have that background. Nick, will you scan down? It will be page. I'm scanning down in mine as well. Yeah, keep going. Now you're ahead of me. Right there. Yeah, right there. This was really the crux of her presentation about, in her mind, how states can improve housing outcomes. And then she went through and walked through different policy templates. Go to the next page, page 12. This is where she acknowledged no template works for all states because they're all starting from different places. But then go to slide 14. But really, she focused on these 4 primary pieces of data, how you encourage housing production in places with strong demand, and what the partnership or the roles are of the state and local governments, low income households and direct financial support there, and then the environmental impacts of growth. What I hope to accomplish over the next few minutes here with Representative Waldrop is this big picture discussion about what to anticipate this session based on all of the dialogue coming through the Commission on Housing Affordability, but also to ask some key questions about what to look forward to and how we work together in the subsequent sessions. Because in many ways, this session feels like the opportunity to reset the foundation for the conversation to come. I could spend all day walking through the Brookings presentation. I'm going to pause though, because Representative, I want to turn the time over to you. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll let you take the floor. And I should note we have Councilmember McKay who's joining us from Riverton, and I think there's nobody new online, but if there is, I'll let you know. So Representative Waldrop, thank you again for your time today, and thank you for the collaboration over the last few months, and the time is yours.
Thank you, Cameron. Just as an introduction, you need to know that Cameron has been a fantastic partner in this effort. I know there's history between the state and the cities and the counties, and some bloody noses. I'm fortunate that I don't carry any of that baggage. And so it's allowed me to come in and just sit down with Cameron at the beginning and say, we're going to agree. We're going to get to a solution that is not a knockdown, drag out, bloody fight. Because in my view, all that does is sets up next year as a continuation of battle number 1, where there's a winner and a loser. And those zero-sum games have gotten us where we are today. And so I don't see the wisdom in continuing that path. I think a much wiser path is to work together to try to find solutions that work in the macro picture, and then figure out how they impact our various cities and towns, and try to deal with as much of the micro picture as we can. We realize there are things that we just can't do. We cannot insulate you completely from your angry pitchfork and torches crowds. But we can try and minimize that. We can try to give you some tools that will allow you to do big picture planning and think down the road to what you want to see in your cities, 10, 20, 30 years from now. The first question I always ask myself is, what is the question? And that sounds like something that makes sense if that's the first question. But the question I ask myself is, what happens if we do nothing? If we just kind of say, hey, the market's doing okay, the housing, yeah, we got some housing issues, and as Cameron's pointed out multiple times, we're permitting at a record level in the state, and that's you guys. What happens if we just do nothing? Here's my view. My view is 30, 40 years from now, we have a generation that is aging out of the workforce that has never owned a home. There are no pensions anymore. People are responsible for their own 401ks and their own IRAs, and some do, many don't. So what does that look like when a majority of our population is disenfranchised and sort of cut loose from the foundation and structure of our system of government and our way of life? I think we've seen a taste of that. We've seen a taste over the last couple of years of what happens when you have a disenfranchised group, whether or not that's real or not, they feel disenfranchised. And so we have marches all over the country. And then we have counter marches all over the country. And we have issues at our Capitol and issues in our national elections. This is, I think, the result of a disenfranchised class. They don't feel like they're a part of the team. We have to reverse that in as much as we possibly can, or at least stop the bleeding. And one of the key components of that, and there are economists that disagree, but in my view, one of the key components of that is making housing available for purchase, to create opportunities for individuals and families to create generational wealth. I would say that if you go back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s when redlining was going on, and you look at what's happened to our African-American communities and the downstream effects of them not having the availability of building generational wealth en masse, we're dealing with that now. I don't want to see that continue. So that's my sort of question answer to that big picture question, and what happens if we do nothing. So with that in mind, we've talked about some big ideas, and this is the time for big ideas. This is a time for really bold leadership, I think. I think there's a general consensus that we have an issue. I don't think anybody's closing their eyes anymore. We're not talking about whether or not we have global warming anymore. We're like, okay, we have global warming. We're not worried about the causes, but everybody agrees that the housing crisis is real, it's here, and it's not going away on its own. So with that in mind, what can we do? What are the tools that are available to us? What are the issues that we can tackle? And I'd like to start with Cam. That last slide you had up there said data. We don't have good data yet as a state. Some of our counties have really good data. Salt Lake City, I think, has really good data, but we don't know what's going on in our state from a housing perspective. We don't know how many affordable units we have. We don't know when they're aging out of the affordability and becoming market rate. We don't know what's permitted. We don't know what's zoned and entitled. I mean, we just have no real picture of what's going on. And part of this is asking you as representatives of your cities and your communities to step back and say, okay, I know that I have a responsibility to my citizens, but my responsibility does not end at that line. And that's hard to sometimes convince your constituents of. I have that problem in the state. Why do you care about Southern Utah? Well, I have a duty to the state of Utah. And I think we all do as elected officials. We're representing the people and the best interests of the people at large, not just this little group of people. And if we start thinking like that, we start thinking about regional solutions, intelligent approaches to regional solutions. What are the resources we need to bring to bear to make the right decisions and make it possible for you to work with your planning staff and your communities to make the right decisions? And that's where I think we get into a lot of, it's really tough right now. I look at Orem, I look at, what's going on in Lehigh. People are out and people are marching and people are angry because they view any density increase as a minus to their community, as a net negative, an increase on the infrastructure impact, an increase on the social impact of having more people, concentrated amounts of people, less affluent people, all those socioeconomic problems. It doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to see, when we say we want density, we don't have to see the projects. What we ought to be seeing is daybreak. We ought to be seeing well-planned, well-thought-out communities that transition from density to less density to less density and out. And that density, again, this is from, where's Andrew? There's Andrew Gruber, the Wasatch Front Regional Council, the vision. That's it. So many acronyms in my life. That document, that whole thing comes from you, comes from our local leadership getting together and deciding, okay, what makes the most sense? Let's see, we got a freeway here and we got an off-ramp here. Well, that's probably a good spot for some density and commercial, and let's do that. And then we go further away, and okay, well, that's maybe a mid hub further up the street. And then we've got mass transit over here. Well, let's do some things around mass transit, because that's an opportunity for people to not use cars. And so we do this great planning, and then we turn you guys loose to the wolves. When you try to follow that plan, there's no one behind you right now. There is nothing behind you. Your council members, you're just set up on the edge of a cliff, and people are throwing rocks at you because their vision is not your vision. And so how do we bridge that gap? How do we create something that we can implement those wise planning ideas, that wise vision, and then not make it so that you guys are the ones on the front line just taking all of the shots over and over and over again from people you love, people you care about, people who are your friends or who used to be your friends and are no longer your friends because you made a decision that they think is going to ruin their lives. So we talk about the Utah way of life. We want to protect our way of life. We want to protect our way of life. If we replace all of our kids going out of state with people coming in from out of state, and we swap that because housing is not affordable, we've lost our way of life. People aren't thinking in those terms. They're thinking of, I want to protect what's here. They're not thinking beyond that to say, what happens if we export our kids to Austin and to Dallas and to Wyoming and to Nevada? And that is what's happening right now. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, I have 3 kids living in my basement. I have my son-in-law and my daughter and their 4 children living with me. And they'd say it like that. I mean, it's not a happy thing. How do we make sure that those kids that have been raised here with the values, with the community, with the culture that has been the hallmark, which is why we're as popular as we are right now, how do we perpetuate that? And the worst thing we can do, in my opinion, is to cut off their opportunities. And right now, that is what they feel. Talk to any millennial, say, are you going to be able to afford a home? No, never. And they're right. Things going the way they are, they never will be able to. They'll get further and further behind. We have to do something to reverse that trend. And this takes big, big action. And it takes regional action, it takes statewide action, and it takes coordination with the local action so that we're not beating each other up over the right thing to do. We all agree on the right thing to do, I think. I don't think anybody doesn't think we should solve this problem. So we need to agree on how we get there. So let me propose a couple of things, and we'll talk a little bit about the bill. And Cameron has been working with us constantly on this, and we've got to get back with him. I'm going to go lasso my co-chair and pin him down, tie an arm behind his back and make him go through this with me. But we're talking about an SB 34 plus concept where we are increasing the obligation a little bit, but also providing an opportunity for prioritization and funding. And I think that's something that we've talked about, and we don't have a final decision on what those numbers look like yet, but that's the theory. And I think that's probably a fair way to do it. And we haven't heard a whole lot of people saying, oh, we can't do these things. But again, SB 34 is not going to change our situation. The thing that comes with SB 34 plus is an increased reporting requirement so that we have consistent uniform reporting across the state so that we can then, and we're appropriating $250,000 for it so that the Department of Workforce Services can hire appropriately and have the resources to appropriately coordinate with everybody in this room and the counties to get that data into one place so that we know when we come back to you and we say, here's the situation. Right now, you guys have all seen we have this missing middle chart and we got this one, and I don't totally trust them. I think they're maybe okay, but we don't know what the big picture looks like. We don't know who's doing missing middle, but they're not doing real high density. We don't know who's doing real high density, doesn't have missing middle. We don't have that full picture of what our state housing stock and opportunities look like. And as that slide said, without that data, there are not a whole lot of good decisions we can make. It's tough without data. So this reporting requirement, I hope you will encourage it, support it, and embrace it. And it's going to be a strain on your staff, I think, because this is pretty granular data. And your planners are going to complain. Everybody's going to complain and just say, yep, you're right. This is hard. And then say, get back to work. Because these things are hard. So that is to me, one of the key components of what we need to do is create some data gathering opportunities so that we can make better decisions going forward. And we don't have to have everybody saying their anecdotal piece and then try to determine whose anecdotal piece is more real than the other's anecdotal piece. And that gets us all into a lot of trouble. We're going to have something about ADUs, again, not major changes. Internal ADUs won't have impact fees. We're talking about licensing. One of the things that I feel strongly about is that we need to give our cities and counties the ability to protect life safety in ADUs, whether they've been around for 500 years or 2 years. Because I guarantee you, if there's a fire and somebody can't get out because they didn't have a smoke alarm or their window was this big, no one is going to want to be on the other end of that discussion. Please. Yeah, and I don't know what those look like. I'm looking for feedback because what we don't want to do is have like, okay, now you got to put in 3-inch, 3-hour walls, and you got to. There's a lot. If I talk to my planners up in Ogden, Mayor, well, not the Ogden guys, the county guys that I work with more, the list of life safety stuff is this long. We need to determine what is critical life safety to a reasonable extent where you can go to somebody who's had an ADU for 40 years and say, look, you don't have a good egress. That's a deal breaker. You have to have egress, and we can give them time to put it in, but they're making money on this ADU. We can't forget that they're making money on this. And so there's a balance there where we need to be able to take care of the citizens that we have an obligation to. And that includes life safety. And so I'm looking for the league to probably come back with some reasonable timeframes and requirements that we want to include in this so that we can address those critical issues. To me, I don't know a lot. I think fire, smoke alarms and egress. Those are my two top things. I don't know what else is in there. Kate? Yeah, there's a switch. You have to slide it.
I think I got it now.
Okay.
I had a question. You mentioned as you were talking about ADUs, business licenses.
Yes.
You're wanting to keep that allowance, a business license, as well as that title restriction?
That's going to be a negotiated piece. I think it makes sense because it gives you, the intent here is to make sure that you have the opportunity to go in and make sure the life safety is taken care of. I don't care what the method is. And, the least intrusive, expensive way we can do that, fantastic. But I don't think we want to keep you blind from knowing what's going on. That's caused so many problems. We got, don't even start me on short-term rentals.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah.
That is part of this key, right? The
Yeah.
trade-off on ADUs and the places you may put them in all of our communities and neighborhoods are a challenge. And I would say to you, I appreciate that you would want to offer some shields for those stones and arrows. But we took on these assignments for the big bucks, just like you make to take them.
Oh, yeah.
So we can do it. It's always helpful if I have more tools in my city toolbox to do that, so that I can work with my residents and my neighbors to do that. In order to get different residents in different neighborhoods to accept ADUs, I need some other tools to be able to offer them in that toolbox. And part of it is that short-term rental component.
Mhm.
There's the next level hard. It's not getting at the affordable housing challenge you want.
Yeah.
It feels
It's-
like they're living next to a hotel. And so
Yeah.
keeping that business license for its potential to help us on the short-term rentals, as well as making sure that people are making money, they're treating this as a business, are providing a safe place for people to live is important. So I would say that's very important for us, that you allow us that toolbox. And then
If I
I'll
could
still
wave my
take your
magic wand,
your
I'd do that
shield, but I
right
won't need
now.
as much of it. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I live in short-term rental heaven in Ogden Valley. And I've watched as friends of mine live in neighborhoods that are no longer neighborhoods. And this is, there are places that are appropriate for short-term rentals and there are places that aren't. And that largely is determined by the fact, what was it when you bought it? What's the expectation of the residents? And if somebody comes in and changes that expectation illegally, how would, I mean, that's wrong. So I can't promise we'll do anything on short-term rentals this session. I'd like to begin the dialogue and the discussion to address that. And I don't want to get too bogged down in all the details, but I do want to mention that life safety one, because that's something that I'm going to look to Cameron funneling your advice and decisions down to us so that we can appropriately address that. And I don't know how we ignore that. And I think we can create a window of compliance or something like that to encourage people to come out and give you that opportunity to work with them and grants or whatever you need to do to get people to deal with those life safety issues. Let's see. I'm not as big on the need for a stick with the SB 34 plus requirements. There is some discussion about that. I think we'll end up with some kind of a stick there, but right now it doesn't even matter because we have no measuring component. There's nothing to measure to hold anybody accountable for that says, well, you're failing or you're not failing because the reporting's terrible. I mean, we don't have anything to really wrap our arms around that. So to a certain extent, we need to develop that first. Cam.
Let me just add one thing that I'll present to the board in a moment. But we've actually gone through the compliance of SB 34. And as a reminder, SB 34 applies to cities over 10,000 and cities over 5,000 in the urban areas. There are 84 cities that have to comply. Right now, the trigger is simply submitting your report by a certain date. And there are actually board cities that are out of compliance with SB 34 right now because they haven't filled out, they haven't submitted the report. So what I want to just be very clear about what the representative is saying on the data piece, because it is a shift from SB 34, and this board needs to discuss if it's a shift that is worth pursuing. And that is, right now we submit the report, and the report triggers the eligibility, and it's a soft deadline. In fact, actually, Nick, can you just pull that PowerPoint up? And because Representative, I think it's important for people just to conceptualize. Yeah, the one I just sent. Yeah, it's the. So again, right now, in order to comply with SB 34, a city has to submit the report by December 1st, but it's a soft deadline. Go down to slide 3. Phew, all right, got it right. Okay. So as of December 30th, which is when DWS gave us the data, these are the city. I'm not sure. Nope, you're good. Nope, you're good. As of December 30th, the following cities are not in compliance with SB 34. Fruit Heights, Grantsville, Mapleton, North Logan, Ogden, Pleasant Grove, Salem, Sunset, Taylorsville, Vernal, West Haven, West Jordan. So those are the cities that as of December 30th had not submitted their annual report. Now it's a soft deadline. So you can, I mean, a city could submit today and qualify, but technically those cities are ineligible for state transportation investment fund dollars because you haven't submitted the report. Now, in the top right, I reference SB 34 as a soft deadline. And one of the things that we had proposed and had brought to this board a few months ago into the LPC was a hard deadline. And you'll see that under a hard deadline of December 1st, American Fork, Bountiful, Cedar City, Clearfield, Midway, Providence, Smithfield, South Jordan, South Ogden, South Salt Lake, South Weaver, Syracuse, Washington Terrace, and West Bountiful would have not met the December 1st deadline for the submission. So this does not include most of the communities off the Wasatch Front because they don't have to comply with this annual standard. But I just wanted to, so when the representative talks about kind of investing in the data collection piece, one of the questions that came up over and over again during the commission this year, and it came up to me, it came up to it was from the co-chair to me in one of the meetings. We have all these cities submitting these reports. What does it actually mean? Like, what is the state of housing in cities? And we couldn't really answer the question. So I could say in Clearfield, they have planned for 5,000 additional units in the State Street corridor, but there's no easy way to demonstrate that or to build it out. So even when the Utah Foundation was building their data set that I briefly shared last time, even that was an incomplete data set. So that's been part of our focus based on the feedback from cities over the last few months, was to get that data piece right so that we have a better understanding of what the housing challenges are statewide in San Juan County, up to Cache County, and everywhere in between. But that just gives you a sense of status quo. Again, as of December 30th, that was when DWS gave us their numbers. It's possible it's changed since then, but that's the quick snapshot, Representative.
Thank you. And I will say and I don't know any of the granular data, but from what I understand from DWS staff, that a lot of the reports that came in were quote unquote garbage. And not in that they didn't try to do something, but that what they submitted wasn't helpful in the overall picture. And so, you know, again, that's sort of I'll just be honest with you guys. I don't know what they looked like, but apparently they didn't do what they were supposed to do in some fashion, but there's no metric that we're working with. Yes.
I'll just hold it. I really appreciate this point. As a city manager, especially, we live and die by data. And in our own experience with compiling that report, we are required to use the data that's provided to us by, trying to remember who the entity is that provides us the data. Workforce Services. Our report this year was exactly the same as our report last year because the data we received from Workforce Services was identical to what we were given last year. And their data is 3 years old. It's 2018 data. And so we are all for this effort. It's not that we're not trying, we are all handcuffed by out-of-date bad data. And so amen to this. This is great. I hope that message gets through loud and clear.
You're not supposed to make my life harder.
I know, I'm sorry.
So I was just texting to say, what the heck? How did we not get submitted by December 1st? And I thought, I know something about that. And then as soon as you said that, I'm like, that's why they
There's
weren't
nothing
sure what
different.
to do. The information was not valid. So they said, we're submitting a report that's not even accurate, but we have to submit it, but they weren't sure what to do. And in trying to get better information, there wasn't better information. So they said, well, we're just going to turn it in. That's right. Yeah.
And that, frankly, is why we need the extra position at DWS, because it doesn't sound like they're keeping up either. And so, again, I'm not sure what the whole answer is, but I know what we're doing, isn't it? And so if you can help me understand what it is that isn't happening, that's hampering you from doing your jobs, and keeping up with stuff. I love it because I need it. So those are kind of the basics of SB 34. I don't think there's a whole lot else that's, and again, SB 34 to me is not a transformational statute. It's not going to transform housing in the state. It's not going to, significantly impact the shortages that we have. It will have some impact, but again, incremental change at this point is really, really not going to cut it. So when I step back and say, okay, so now what? There's another point, and Mayor Ramsey actually gave a very good thought. Quotas don't work. And that's absolutely true. But we also have to have some kind of a measuring stick against which we're judging ourselves. What do we have? Who's doing what? How are we doing this? And what are we aiming for? So rather than create a system, that I originally thought, well, let's just take the public employees of the state and divide it by the state number, and then we got to house our public employees in some sort of affordable housing. I mean, okay, maybe. I think the better approach is to create an obligation for the acronym UEOC through the Commission on Housing Affordability, which is a subcommittee, and then through whatever middle committee that is, to spend the year and come back next year with a measuring stick so that we can develop what is a sensible measuring stick, rather than me feeling good about doing something this session. Boy, I really showed them and I got a measuring stick in there and they didn't like it. That's cool. I would much rather have something that makes sense. And it may be we come back to that as the end of the day and say, hey, you know what, that's a great measuring stick. But let's spend some time working on it. Because while we're gathering this data, we have time to figure out what the measuring stick is that we're going to use. And it may be, is a part of that gathering of data that we say, oh, you know what, looks like it might make sense when we gather this data. It looks like this might be the way to start measuring ourselves and understanding what it is that we are or aren't doing in the different regions and cities. So that's going to be my proposal. I don't know if we'll put that in the CHA bill or if it will be in a separate bill. I want to keep the CHA bill of things that are doable, workable. And if we have something that's going to sort of be a heavy drag on that bill, I want to take it out, put it in a separate bill. I've got a separate bill file. So the one that may be a heavier drag is this idea, this concept. So one of the things, and again, I think this is probably not in dispute, is that when a city makes a, potentially a zoning decision that upzones an area, right now, that's poison. We've got entire elected bodies and cities that have been replaced based on the fact that density is not what we want in our community. We want to preserve our way of life. So first of all, we have to, I think, change that mindset from density is evil to density is a necessary evil. And it's something we have to deal with if we're going to maintain our way of life. By not dealing with it, we are guaranteeing that our way of life is toast. If we deal with it, I think we can perpetuate our way of life, and we can do it intelligently. And that's, I look at Wasatch Front Regional Council. There are planning tools available. I want to make sure from a state standpoint, we have a sufficient planning support for your staff so that you can do intelligent design and not just have to kind of look at each lot and say, okay, what are we doing on this lot? No, we're not doing that here. And there's little coordination but that takes time and money and a lot of effort. So we want to make sure that and these guys have done Mill Creek, that the one you just did?
Well, we've done a bunch of multiple cities in this room are the partners in that work here.
So I think if we're going to ask that, I think we want to provide that support because it's really tough. It's that creates total imbalance when some cities have the staff and the budget to do it and some just don't.
So,
the other idea that I'd like to present and I think makes sense in the macro view is to create and I don't know what you call them, nodes, transportation nodes, hubs, whatever you want to call them. And in the middle of that nub or hub or node is, let's say, a tracks line is one, and a front runner station is one, or a freeway off ramp, freeway interchange is one, or maybe a state highway interchange, where you have the opportunity to get people on and off of transportation resources quickly and efficiently without creating the infrastructure issues you get when you start putting it further and further away, and you're funneling more and more traffic through your collectors and arterials and all that. And that's what people complain about. Oh, they're putting that over here. Oh, great. Now we're going to have, a 45-minute drive into the freeway. But again, whenever you guys do that, you get hammered. So the idea would be to create some concentric circles around these hubs. And again, this may or may not be ripe for this session, but to say, okay, the state has a significant investment in these nodes and hubs. We're putting a lot of money into this transportation infrastructure, and then we're turning you guys out to the wolves to implement it in some instances. So let's use these hubs as a central focus point for increasing density opportunities. Now, this is, I think, critical, that if we create these hubs and, like, let's say a mile in, and there's 4 different hubs, just for discussion purposes. The first closest hub would be permitted for up to a certain number of units per acre. And the second hub would be permitted up to a lower number of units per acre, the third lower, and the fourth lower, and then you go out to whatever it is your regular. This is an interesting idea. What I don't want to do is mandate that is the density, because that doesn't reflect the market, and then that may tie a city's hands from doing anything because it doesn't meet the density requirements, because nobody's going to come in and build that density around that node or hub. But let's make it so that they can, if the market demands it. And then you work with them in your normal process to make sure that what they're doing is wise planning, and we incorporate those strategies and the resources that we have. And if somebody comes and says, well, I only want to do this much, that's okay. That's the market. I don't think we can force the development into where we wish it was just because we want it there. Money doesn't work that way. Real world doesn't work that way. China, it works awesome. But it doesn't work here. Please.
I got the microphone. I'm going to use it first. So, Representative, thank you. That's right. There's a lot to unpack here from what you said, and I just want to say, as a city that at Mill Creek, I think we're really trying to do the right thing to address the growth issue that we recognize, and our role as kind of like an inner ring suburb, if we have those in Utah, right? The assistance that we could use from the legislature, because the Wasatch Choice 2050 plan is our plan, right? It's local government leaders. To implement that plan, we need to have engagement with the public. And I recognize what you're saying about the pitchforks and torches, but to make our system work, we not only have to give people the ability to acquire equity and acquire a home, but we also need, for our democracy, to make people feel heard. And so as local government leaders, our job is to deal with those pitchforks and torches, right? And the way the state can help us is to help educate the public about the problem that we have. Funding for planning helps us do that. Every time we go out in engagement on a project or on a node of density and talk to people about it, it's an opportunity for us to interact with the public and to explain to them things that, like, this growth that you don't like is your kids and grandkids.
Yeah.
66%. And if we don't address this growth, not only will they not be able to buy a house, but you might not be able to afford your taxes if your property appreciates relative to others, and you end up paying more. So that education component is where we can really use some help, and that folds in nicely to the planning realm, because those kinds of engagements in public meetings that you have about a project are where the rubber meets the road, about engaging with the public in a way where they're not just kicking up and yelling at us, but we're able to interact with them and explain the why the market wants to build this here and why we're going to permit it because we need it. The other thing I'll say that, and I'll give it to Gary then, but I like the idea of 34 plus. I like the idea of better accountability, and I like the idea of collecting more data, because we need that. We all need that data to make intelligent policy decisions. But just that data will also help, I think, reaffirm the concept that we know is that one size doesn't fit all, that our communities are different. And you're right, the market will not bring certain things to certain areas because the community's not ready for it, or there's no transportation, there's no infrastructure. That's the other thing that we're struggling with all along the way, is to make sure that there's the infrastructure is in place to handle this tsunami of growth, so that people's sewers aren't backing up, and things like that. So as a partnership, we know the problem, we see it too. I think as local government leaders, we want to help, but I don't want just help. I don't want help just saying like, oh, cover from the public, because I'm not afraid of engaging with the public. That's my job, and I actually like a lot of it. I mean, I don't necessarily like being yelled at, but I do like being able to go into a forum where I can talk to people about what we're trying to accomplish and why we need to accomplish it and the consequences of not doing it. So money for planning and accountability through measures that we're doing to achieve, housing, meeting the demand, right? There's a demand side. And then the intractable problem that I guess just takes money from heaven is affordability, and how to achieve affordability. And I don't know a way to do that without money from someplace to either incentivize the right kind of building. And clearly it's our job to make sure that we have areas zoned for smaller lots and more density, so that you can build affordable, right? But we also need the help of the state and the development community, frankly, to build affordable, and to if we give the keys for affordability, we can't have market rate building, right? So anyway, sorry, that's a
totally
lot.
agree. And I do have one answer for you though. So right now there's a meeting going on between Salt Lake Chambers taking the lead, and I hadn't thought about this, but we ought to have the league represented in that meeting. The governor are they? Okay. The governor put $1 million in his budget for messaging. There are another $3 million in ARPA funding that we're trying to make that fit that round peg fit in the square hole of ARPA rules. And we think there's a method where we can do that within the rules of ARPA to unlock that other $3 million. It's earmarked for messaging, but it has some potentially, I mean, I think the rules are like a week and a half old or something, so we don't know exactly, but and they keep changing, but it looks like if we create something that leads people to the end of the row, that we can use that for messaging. And then in addition to that, I know the realtors are bringing in, I think, $250,000 from national groups to assist in training our public officials, city councils, and trying to figure out how do we create something where you guys can collaborate with one another on a regional basis and talk about best practices and talk about that. So I think the realtors are bringing that to the table as a method of trying to address some of those concerns. And I don't think this is not going to be a realtor-led deal. This is not going to be, this is a coalition of the willing to create messaging that goes out broadly to the public, targeted to public where we have areas that are in need. And we have to, frankly, convince people that this is in their best interest. And right now, they don't think density in any form is in their best interest. And so we struggle with that. Please.
I would say that I'd be careful about painting too broad of a brush with all of our communities and all of our residents that nobody's supportive of density, because I think I would guess nearly everybody here around this table at least could point to it. Sometime in the last 5 years when we've upzoned property, increased density.
Don't ruin my narrative.
What's that?
Don't ruin my narrative.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to provide some
I
perspective.
want to blow his
You
narrative
said
up.
not to make your job more difficult. Now I can't ruin your narrative either. I don't know what I can do.
I do. I want to ruin his narrative. So when you're done.
So I think we are seeing good actors where that is taking place. I think it's more difficult for newer elected officials, but I think the more seasoned ones understand that you can't please everybody. And certainly the city managers, speaking of collectively, see this over time, that there is a correct place for density. And huge kudos to Wasatch Front Regional Council and its focus on transportation hubs. Just a perspective, maybe to provide into the narrative is, in addition to that being an ideal location for housing, it's also unfortunately an ideal location for jobs centers and for commercial and retail. And in order to minimize this traffic that we're talking about by putting, maybe dense housing someplace far away, we also have to be cognizant that we can't just force commercial or job centers to go someplace far away. It all needs to coexist in that same area. And that is a legitimate balance that I think sometimes there has been a narrative that you've probably heard, that cities are reserving commercial property at the expense of housing in some of these areas. But if that's the case, it's for good reasons. It's because we recognize that we can't force those other uses other places either without negative consequences or at all. Retail follows rooftops. And there's a reason that R.C. Willey, after many years, moved from West Syracuse to next to I-15 in Layton. And so I think one thing that we are hoping for out of this conversation is a recognition that those uses all have to coexist, and that if we are being handcuffed in our ability to match all of those uses, then we really aren't solving this longer term picture that I believe sincerely you weren't trying to. And I appreciate that. But I hope that narrative I hope that conversation is happening. I saw Andrew nodding vigorously over there.
Yeah, mixed use. Yeah, absolutely.
That is prime real estate in order to make all of this work, and not one piece can force out another piece.
And there's another shift that's going on to couch shopping. Point of sale is now couches, and it's increasing. You look at the data, and Cam has that, but rural, the point of sale couch shopping proportion is massively higher. And even in the larger cities that are sales tax generators, even that, their percentages of point of sale being the living room couch and Amazon or other online retailers is growing as well. So that shifts a little bit of the discussion about sales tax share and that whole discussion as well, because I think things are changing in that, and I think we have to acknowledge those realities. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Our internet sales are probably number 9. Our number one retail centers are still a couple of car dealerships and our major grocery stores. And some of that will never go away to a large degree. And so I would agree that it is changing, but some of these are just basic services that people still need to get to, the jobs and other things. And so not disagreeing with you, just want to make sure that we're temperate in all the things we're
absolutely. And I think the point of that is, if we're looking at changing sales, there's been discussion about sales tax distribution formula changes. And if this is changing in an increment enough to offset basically what otherwise we would be doing, why would we do the other thing? That's my point. Okay, sorry, Mayor. Ruined my day.
Well, I'm not trying to do, is it on? I'm not trying to ruin your day. I actually do appreciate your approach. I appreciate your reasonableness approach. My point is this, and I've said this before in this group, but I want you to hear it. I've been doing it a while. Between the council and being mayor, I've been doing it about 14 years. And 10 years ago, we created a TRZ zone before it was such a thing around our front runner stop. And it's an unlimited height in an unlimited density zone. It's 100 acres. And I thought I was a genius to do it because I thought, well, we'll get all the density will just come. It'll be awesome. Yeah. If I could do it again, I would do a building limit, a minimum height. I would, because last year in the middle of this ADU business and all that we have going on, the residential portion gets taken down in this unlimited zone and they build a 4-story apartment complex. 4, not 5, not 6, 4. They build 6 buildings, office buildings in there. They don't build them 10 stories. They don't build them 12. They build them 4 or 5. Now that's the market and we can't fix that. I can't fix the developer's pencil because they'll look you right in the eye and say it doesn't pencil to go above 4 stories. And so, but the problem that I have with this new TRZ zones, because I know they're going to want to come down the line in my city to the end of my tracks line, and they're going to want to say, see, Draper is a bad player. We're not, because they could have gone 30 stories in the zone I created a decade ago. Now they want to come into the middle of town. And this is the problem we all have with our residents. When we've created places to do real serious density, which they won't do. They can, they won't. But they want to come now downtown and say, well, now Draper's not a good player or whatever city's not a good player because we won't let you do it right in there in the heart of this little. And so that narrative is something that's got to be dealt with because it's real and it's very frustrating to local officials. My good friend and mayor in Vineyard in the other county over the hill, Julie, they have a zone by their front runner stop that's zoned for 20,000 residential units right now. So that city has stepped up to the old plate and hit the ball. But do we have the ability to move those people? No, we really don't. So we have some spots where you could take your carrots and really make them work. And then maybe some other cities could see, hey, if we do this, this is the way it works. But I just want you to be cognizant of, we're not bad players in this room. And some of us, we stepped into when we did this unlimited zone, it was a brutal meeting. It was very difficult. This was 10 years ago, but our citizens have accepted and they expect it. And so then when you see a small building go up and then they want to come downtown and build 4 stories, a condo right in the middle of the neighborhood, I feel for the people. I think, well, it makes sense to me. So when you're looking at the holistic approach, I think we've created some zones and I think there's cities that'll create those zones. But these developers got to step up and do it. They can't just build 4 stories until it doesn't pencil and then come into your next one and say, I need to do another 4-story building, really make all your neighbors mad when I could have done, 15, 20 stories over here. And, of course, I've got the prison site coming in our town and I expect that to be big. I don't want anything other than a 10-story building minimum in that place. I want it big, but we'll see. I mean, part of this, we all want to solve this problem, but not all of it's a government problem. Not all that we can solve. We can't tell the developers what their profit margin is going to be because they don't, and we don't control supply chain. We don't control. I just want you to know we're not all bad players. I appreciate your approach, but this is a real stark example of cities not being the problem and getting blamed for being the problem when we're really trying to give the tools to solve the problem and not getting any credit for it. So just food for thought, but thank you for your approach.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that's a great example of why not to simply mandate, X, Y, and Z across the board, because it's very difficult to have that make any sense at all. And I do think developers need to come to the table. There's not enough government money in the world to fix this problem. I'm looking at policy levers that can be, and in some cases, it'll be tough because we're gonna gore some sacred cows in this process because we're looking to overturn a significant history of strictly local control 100%. And, now we're seeing, in some instances, a neighborhood thwarting an entire regional development plan, a transportation master plan, because a neighborhood comes and stops a project from going that would otherwise support that regional transportation plan. So it's a delicate balance. And this is really instructive to me of some of the water that's gone under this bridge. Because that's been the narrative, right? Oh, it's the cities, oh, it's the developer, and it's this.
I'll send you the photos.
Yeah, no, but it's a win-lose, it's a zero-sum game. and you're the bad actors or you're the good actors. And again, most cities are doing the right things. There are a few that, probably could use some help, but the intent is to create a structure where we can have transformational change. So that's my goal, is policy structure, not necessarily government dollars. We can support it, but we're never going to come up with enough money to, make everything magically better. Mayor.
If I can just speak in support of collecting data, and I think you're right. If there's more reporting requirements, it is going to be a strain on our staff, and we'll hear that and we'll feel that, especially they're already overworked and none of us can afford to hire more staff or pay them more money anyway.
And there's
all
nobody
facing
to
that.
take the jobs anyways.
Yeah, it's really, the constraints are real. But part of the reason why I think it's just such a good idea, obviously, to collect the data, I couldn't agree with you more that we need that data to make the best policy decisions. But I think collectively amongst a lot of cities, we do have a reasonable understanding about what is taking place, which I think is why there's pushback from cities on the narrative that is so outdated that cities don't care, don't get it, and aren't on board. It's very outdated. And I think that's where the pushback, comes from. Collecting data, I think, is also going to help show stories like that. Did you know this zone even exists in Draper? Did you know how many units are there? Did you know that there's 20,000 in Vineyard? Did you know South Jordan, put 1,800 new dwelling units in our city last year? I mean, all the things that we're all doing, that everybody's doing everywhere, which is different everywhere. But I think the fact that we have the chance to report it, to me, I don't see that as a bad thing. I think that's going to be helpful because it's going to help with the narrative that is outdated, that cities don't care, don't get it, aren't doing it, won't step up and do it. So I think additional reporting is helpful because I think it's going to help. The data is going to be good to have collected. We have a bit of an understanding, but I think it's going to also help counteract maybe some of the anecdotal policy proposals, right? That those working in cities go, wait, what? That's not actually how it works, because the narrative that cities don't get it, don't care, won't do anything is just simply wrong. It is so outdated. It isn't accurate. So I think additional reporting is actually going to be very beneficial for us, and collecting the overall data so everyone knows. Not just cities know what's happening in cities, but the state knows what's happening. I don't know how good policy can be made not knowing. So I think I'm really supportive of additional data, because I just think we need it to know where we're really at. And I think it might surprise some people for the better where we are really at. You know what I mean? So.
Absolutely. And I'll just close with this. Those who know me and have worked with me in other settings know that I recognize my stupidity. He's laughing because he knows it's true. No, I recognize my limitations. I am not Andrew Gruber or Miranda.
They don't recognize theirs at all.
Yeah. They have no limitations. I view them as unlimited. I don't know how to do their job. I don't know how to do your job, Kate. I don't know how to do your job, your job, your job, or your job. I probably never will. So I don't view my job as a legislator to come in and tell people how to do their jobs. My job, as I view it, is to collect information from those who are on the front lines and making those decisions and making those determinations, and use that information to craft policy that those experts agree is going to produce change. If I substitute my wisdom for yours, and I say, here's what you have to do, and this is how you're going to have to do it, and then I come and try and hold you accountable for that, why didn't you succeed? Well, you told me exactly what to do and how to do it. It's your fault. And I'll say, oh, I gave you the mandate, but I gave you the wrong tools and the wrong expectation, and I set it up to fail. That's not my job, to be the super planner of the entire state of Utah. My job is to be in the middle of this really messy discussion and watch all this play out. And it's a big puzzle. It's kind of a game. And you have to know what the pieces are, and you have to know what the moving pieces are and what their value is and how you adjust through that. And then you take that puzzle and you create solutions. And that's my background in real estate development and in the social benefit housing fund that I'm doing. I'm working with some cities on now. It's just solving the problem, understanding what the problem is, understanding what the moving parts are, and then producing solutions that will address those things, and not simply feeling good about myself because I did something. I don't need that. I don't feel good about myself no matter what. So it doesn't really matter.
Mayor, I mean,
Hey, hugs.
because of my day job, I get to spend a little bit of time with Representative Waldrop. And so this is both a perspective, I think, for fellow board members, but then also, a reminder of some time you and I got to spend together as well. In addition to, he must be doing a fairly good job because he keeps getting fun assignments at the legislature. This is not his only fun assignment. He also gets to serve as one of the alcohol policy leads, and it's a policy area I get to spend a little time in as well. And so I guess what I would share with the board is that he's genuine when he says that he doesn't know everything and he's willing to learn, because he got to visit a grocery store and a liquor store with me in the middle of a pandemic to talk about those issues, and gave a lot of his time to understand something, and also did a non-alcoholic taste testing of flavorings as well. They gave his time.
I liked the antifreeze.
I know you did. So he was willing to put in the time to I think, learn and understand, not having served on a local government side from all of us. And I guess what I would say back to you, Representative, is this group will field trip you and show you the challenges and the tools that we think would be helpful. If you'll come do it with us, you will have hosts and friends in every corner of the state to so that you can see it from all the perspectives, so that then when you're ready to run your legislation, if our first step is to get good data to then make decisions, great. But when we get through with the next 44 days, let's be together in road trips so that you can see these, because I echo what Mayor Silvestrini said, that we I always appreciate someone who will stand next to me in a fight, but I don't need you to stand in front of me. So just help me get the right tools and come do the field trips with us, and I'm confident that you'll do them because I've seen you do them at the Hill with the other hard assignments that you've done.
Yeah.
So I'm a little on the more rural side, and I think that we've talked about how the data is important, and I think it is really important, but I also think that we're at a time where big ideas, and you mentioned this before, that we're at that point too, where big ideas are going to have to play into this. So I think that both will have to play into what works best. I don't think there's a one size fits all for the whole state of Utah, and I think that we've agreed with that. But down in Blanding, Monticello, San Juan County area, things are different. Sometimes we often feel neglected on things like this because we're just carved out of it, like it doesn't even apply. So what can we do, and how do we put ourselves into the plane as far as all these things go in rural? How can we help? Because I think that that's what we want to do, is we want to help. And how do we make it so it does fit a little bit better with the rural side of things?
That's a great question. One thing I forgot to mention. So with the change of the CHA going from its own thing to fitting under the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, the other thing that I think makes sense, and I think everybody's agreed on this, is we're going to subdivide the CHA into different subgroups. One of those subgroups will be rural. Zone defense, straight up. 2-3. Oh, okay. No, so we'll have a rural policy group that is focused on rural policy within the CHA. And then we'll have an urban, we'll separate out low income, because the low income advocates feel like they don't get heard all the time. And so we need to separate these areas of interest and expertise so that you can bring to the CHA in a coordinated and sort of consistent way the things that we need to hear about rural issues. Because frankly, again, I look at the big picture, rural Utah is going to be the key to dispersing the growth in Utah. And that's going to really make some people so mad. And I mean, I tell this people all the time, my wife is such a NIMBY up in Ogden Valley. She grew up there in the 70s and 80s, you know, it was beautiful, rural, poor farming community. Now it's got more second homes than primary homes. And it's a very different place. And so I talked to her about, oh, you know, we need to create some workforce housing up here. You know, let's do this. You know, she wants to light me up. Those are the conversations that are going to happen. But I think that's a good start to that solution. I know we focused on rural. The governor's put 50 million for a rural incentive or not incentive, but a loan fund to help rural communities do the development they need to. I mean, basically, we know their infrastructure is lacking in rural Utah, and we have to address that. And that's something you can't do on your own because the cost always comes before the payback. And so if we can find a mechanism to give you a tool to set the table for development and for growth in an appropriate and wise and structured and well stewardship way, I think that's our duty. And I have somewhere written down the different. I think we had affordable housing, we had rural housing, we had moderate income housing group, and then a market housing group, so that we can address the different aspects of housing affordability writ large, instead of focusing on affordable housing. You know, the solution to our problem is volume. We have to create more volume. We're not slowing down. People are still moving here. People are still having kids, even though they're having a little fewer kids. We're still, you know, we're still going to grow, and we're going to grow like crazy. And so we have to find ways to create more volume. That may be innovative construction techniques and prefabricated homes. Or I went and toured the concrete home, the 3D printing concrete home. Holy cow. You haven't seen that? That's blow your mind. It's in Midvale. And I can give you the address, but they are literally printing big gantry overhead in a 3D printer, and they print out a concrete form and fill it with foam, and it's a house. It's amazing. And I don't know if how prime time ready that is, but it's, yeah. And they're doing them in Africa now, you know, it's a great test, you know, area there, but please.
I worry a bit, I mean, because we talk so much about numbers and density and zoning, and what we're really talking about is affordability and the cost of building a home, cost of building an apartment building. Mayor Walker talked about them not going over 4 stories because you add immediately on top of just the cost of that
Whole
4th
fire,
story,
yeah, the whole fire.
or of the 5th story, your 15% additional cost, which now makes it unaffordable. And so builders are saying, well, even in an apartment building, we can only go to here. But I mean, KSL pulled from the realtors comment, or their study talking about housing affordability, and that 2015, I think is when or 16, you needed to make $58,000 to afford a median income home, and now you're 6 figures.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at Clearfield, and we've got a development coming in that we've gone dense with.
Yeah,
I mean,
brilliant.
it's 0 lot lines. There's 106 homes coming in. And you would look at that and say, okay, it's in an industrial area. It's 106 homes. This is affordable. This is great. They're townhome style homes, just separated. They're 2,400 square feet. The average price on them is going to start in the 480s. And so you look at that and say, okay, this is supposed to be our affordable. And yet we've just said that in order to even move to this subdivision, you're going to have to make 6 figures between you and your spouse. And how do you pull that off? And so I just worry that we push this, and it is constantly the talk of, oh, it's zoning and it's the cities. And I mean, like I said, Mayor Walker and I can tell you, it's not that. We've got the ability to go as tall as they want. We put a minimum of 4 stories, and that's where they cap it. I have my first 5th story building coming in, but it's a small building, and they just, it's even on an apartment, it's hard to do it. And so now you look at that to say, well, they need 6 figures to afford a median income house. And that's because there really isn't anything else other than, when they say 460 is median income, there's not much to find under that point. but to live in an apartment's 18 to 1900
Right.
or more. And that's in my area. That's not downtown Salt Lake. And so you need just as much to live in the apartment, but you don't have to have $55,000 to put down on it and a 50% debt ratio. It's so many things that we talk about, and it just scares me because all we hear from the legislature is, oh, it's density, or it's you're zoning improperly, or you're putting commercial where it should be residential because you don't want the residential. And yeah, I think Kate said it best. And we've all pushed at some point or another, or I guess it was Gary, that we've all upzoned at some point to allow this to happen. We can build, but it's still not affordable.
Yeah,
And
costs aren't- yeah,
and
costs aren't
until
going
we
down.
don't have the demand, until we have built enough to outrun the demand, which I just don't know that you can.
Yeah.
But we're not affordable. And unless you're building out of straw, I don't even think 3D printing, you're going to get that below that point.
Yeah, it's phenomenally expensive. And part of it is you got land costs on the Wasatch Front. And again, that's why I talk about rural Utah as being, I think, one of the keys to the solution, because you still have land availability. I mean, you're not in the bobsled track of between the lake and the mountain. And yeah, there's land available, but it's at a premium. And part of the problem that I think we face is we try to put government incentives in place or other things. There's very little we can do to make sure that water gets all the way to the end of the road to the consumer. Tax rebates, all of those things. I mean, it's almost impossible to make that get all the way down to the bottom, because usually it gets picked up somewhere in the middle, and you've created a winner in there that may take a little bit of a haircut, and maybe hardship. I was a developer once. I know what that whole story is. And our traditional financing model, frankly, is broken across the nation. Nearly 60% can't get financing for a home. And again, when I look at the big picture, I say, oh my, if we delay 10 years in allowing people to get into homes, we're that much behind. But if we don't do it now, then we'll be 20 years behind. So yes. And I could take off my legislator hat and put on my other hat, and I'm working on, I think an innovative solution in the other world to deal with the financing issues. And we've got some good support from our banks and other big players in that I hope can start to address that and change a little bit of that narrative. Because right now it's, go get a 3% loan, and then you have a second mortgage and you got PMI. And so your payment is $1,800. So it's not really affordable. So yeah, it makes me sad. I'm going to go cry.
Thank you. I'm just going to see if anybody online has any questions that they wanted to ask, and then we'll just really thank you for coming. We appreciate your time. Is there anybody online who had anything you wanted to ask or say? Okay,
Hi, I'll just speak up. I think one of the issues in terms of future growth that we all need to think about, especially those of us in rural Utah that have less snow falling than you seem to have on the Wasatch Front. And even then, I think water resources are going to be a critical issue in the future for additional growth.
It's scary. It's very scary right now. And we're focusing, again, we're doing what we can, but we're focusing on, 10% of the 3% with residential water use. And that's not going to make a long-term difference. That's a little Band-Aid on a big, big wound. So we have to change that narrative. Do you want to hear my Elon Musk size idea on this?
of course.
I'm just going to throw it out there because this came to me 2 nights ago, and I'm so proud of it. Our agricultural use uses 70% of our water, 75% of our water. We can't afford to invest in our agriculture infrastructure because it's way too expensive. The dollars to deal with that problem of creating efficient agricultural watering astronomical. However, we have some downstream water users that would love to see a little more water come their way. It would seem to me there's an opportunity to work with a California and Arizona and Nevada and say, okay, if you guys will give us X, $1 billion, and whatever those numbers are, we can release X amount of water to you beyond what you're getting right now, and create a solution using their money, our water, our land. The net is a net gain to the system, but we don't know how to finance that. We don't know how to finance this massive net gain that we've got sitting in our water system and our irrigation systems, that is going to waste right now largely. And it's the biggest, that's the biggest rock in the pile by a long ways. So anybody take that idea, run with it, go talk to Elon, whatever you need to do and figure it out. That's my contribution to water.
Madam President, if I could just jump in really quick.
Please, Mayor.
I want to say thank you, Steve. You've been on the hot seat for an hour and a half, and I totally understand that there are no really easy solutions to this. I appreciate you being one of our representatives up here in Northern Utah and your willingness to engage in this dialogue and discussion. And so just giving the Heisman to everybody, because these are really hard issues. And I want to say thank you for that. And I've got to jump off. I've got another COVID related meeting. We're losing, like everybody is, employees, that are dropping like flies for a little bit, but this is really important to us. And I appreciate your willingness to come and engage with the league and give us your ideas and be willing to listen. I think that's a big step as we try to figure some of this stuff out. There are no easy answers. You said earlier that you wish you had a magic wand. Wish everybody in the room did. We'd be done and move on. That's why we're all in tough positions. But thank you for being here. Thank you for spending an hour and a half with us. And we need you to know how much we appreciate your willingness to come and engage in this dialogue, because you come here representing the legislature, which is not just you. It's 102 people. And you took a lot of hard questions, and I appreciate it. And I hope you'll be willing to continue to dialogue with us as we work through some of this stuff, because we're all feeling hammered right now. Not just you, everybody in that room. My daughter tested positive last night, or I'd have been there today. These are really important discussions and dialogues, but I really want you to know how much we appreciate your willingness to come and jump on the hot seat and take some hard questions. Thank you very much.
Anytime, Mayor.
Representative, thank you. Thank you for your time
Thank
and
you
your
all.
willingness to collaborate. I think we all recognize, and it's good for us to all remember, that as we're looking at our communities and planning our communities, we can't plan without being mindful of the bigger picture of the entire state. And I think as you're looking at the entire state, can't plan without being mindful of what it means to communities. And I think if we all remember that, we'll get there. Thank you for being
No,
here.
thank you. And I really appreciate this. This is, there's a quote from Tommy Boy I could use that I won't, but it's better to get the information from the ground level. There's something about a butcher and a steak. I'd rather hear it
I
from
do know the quote you're thinking.
So I appreciate your willingness to engage. And again, there's no criticism of me in this. This is not my thing. This is our thing. This is not, I don't have any pride in authorship in any of this. This is not about me. So feel free to tell me I'm stupid anytime you feel the need, in a nice way, hopefully, but thank you.
Representative, you might be a little misguided.
Oh, that mic again.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's his nice way.
If you're asking, no, I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding.
Thank
But
you.
we really do appreciate what you do. Thank you very much.
I know I can count on you up there.
I know, and I gotta go. I'm sorry, I gotta sneak off. But thank you for being here. and know that we really appreciate it.
Well, and happy to have the Commission on Housing Affordability now added under the umbrella of the Utah Economic Opportunities Commission. I think that's going to matter, and I think that is a good place.
Yeah.
The subcommittees are a great idea and something that we'll talk about more here, but something that we're working on here too, because a lot of good work to be done, and we'll continue to be at the table with you and do the best we can to figure this out. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just give you my cell phone number, 801-389-9329. I only have one number, so there's no, 801-389-9329. And I'm happy to engage in the discussion, and understand what is, in the communities. So thank you very, very much for your
Thank you.
service.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Do you want to go ahead?
Thank you again, Representative, for all the time. For the League Board, there are other items for us to get through, and we will fly through them for the next half an hour. But I think it was important for you to hear those big picture thoughts. I'm going to just summarize the 4 concepts that he referenced, some of which may be in bills this year, some of which may not, but are all on the table for discussion. One is the better data piece. The second is the better compliance, and recognizing compliance means both the hard deadline for reporting, but also what you're eligible for. So he referenced the prioritization. That concept came from us. That came out of our caucus meetings during the interim, about recognizing that if a city's going above and beyond, that they should be recognized accordingly when the state is prioritizing funds. The third piece was what sort of measurement is the ultimate goal when it comes to planning for housing, whether that's affordable housing, market rate housing, moderate income housing, the whole gamut. And then the fourth was that nodes of transportation concept, which is not a new concept. It actually, the governor of Washington just announced this week a similar proposal in the Washington Assembly that in his case would actually, in the state of Washington's case, would actually preempt local government around transportation nodes and corridors to facilitate more housing units. And we as an organization have talked about those concepts in years past. And as you heard, Representative Waldrop wants to revisit those, whether that's this session or in the interim. It's hard for me to ask the question that I want to ask, which is for you as a board to help give us policy direction of where the lines are on concepts that don't have any specific form yet. So I'm not going to ask that question, but recognize during the session, if some of these concepts come up, we are going to be relying on our standing policy resolutions. We're going to be relying on the Lpc survey results, which we want you to officially approve today so that we can share those with House and Senate leadership and the governor's office. And we'll be meeting with the officers weekly, Lpc weekly, and then daily meetings with other key city leaders. So it's entirely possible that something like this transportation circle concept, which hadn't really been contemplated until the last couple of weeks, that could get some legs this session, and we'll need to make some decisions on about how it fits into our principles. Now, I think there are some other ways we can go about facilitating better use of our transit assets and better planning around transit. So I have been in conversations with UTA personnel and staff looking at some varying options to enhance planning around TODs that would ideally fall short of a state mandate or a state preemption, but could lead to enhanced prioritization for station area plans or development proposals that come forward, say to a South Jordan city that's consistent with the station area plan. Those would be prioritized over other types of land use applications. In other words, trying to direct the attention around TODs in a similar fashion to what we did with HTRZs last year. But this train is moving fast, and I use the pun intentionally, because there's a lot of focus on TODs. Now, Mayor Monson, I'm glad you raised the point about rural Utah, because the next TOD that you'll have will be the first. And we actually have been raising the issue about the CHA being too big. So the only drawback to that, of course, is now this means even more subcommittee meetings for league staff to monitor over the interim, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But we think it also provides more opportunity for league members to engage with the CHA. Right now, our two reps are Orem Councilmember Tom McDonald and Salt Lake City former council member Andrew Johnston. So those two individuals speak for the entire league on this huge issue. I see an opportunity as it breaks into subgroups to engage more league members around the state to bring specific expertise. So again, data compliance, the accountability on those measurements, which we've never really had before, but that I anticipate is going to be a centerpiece of where he wants to go this session. And then having that discussion around the fair share concept in every city, planning for certain allocations, not necessarily quotas, but figuring out what that means, and then the transportation circles. So any follow-up questions for me or any follow-up direction for league staff as we continue engaging in this space over the next few weeks? People, the packet.
I think since we don't have a bill yet, the bill is expected tomorrow. They've been saying that for 2 weeks. Okay, we're still waiting for the bill language. And so I don't know if we can even give any direction until we really know what specifically they're proposing. I think there was a lot of good feedback and discussion today. I don't know. Anybody feel different than that?
Perfect. So Justin. Okay, so Nick is bringing up the LPC survey results that I mentioned. We've been relying on these a lot. As a reminder, this is what over 100 members submitted. We referenced them at LPC, and it was a joint effort with Wasatch Front Regional Council. So go down to the bottom. This is in your packet, and we have not publicized these beyond our own internal use. And we want you to affirmatively say, yes, we want to share these results with leadership, the governor's office, et cetera, to help frame the dialogue into the session. So if you go all the way down, Nick, you'll see what we've done in this document is we've essentially ranked them. Go all the way down. We've ranked them from 1 to 44 of what was the most comfortable, least comfortable. Now that's the aggregate score. We could show you the spreadsheet where we've broken it down by respondents off the Wasatch Front, on the Wasatch Front. We've broken it down by big city versus medium-sized city versus high growth city, et cetera. But we feel like that's more internal than external. But for external purposes, we want to be able to say to Representative Waldrop and the governor and others, of the scale of 1 to 44, here's the area where you've got great consensus. Here's the area that we've called the stretch area. Retail incentives, frankly, is in that stretch area. And then here's the area that our members have said are lines we're not willing to cross. So I would welcome a motion to confirm your comfort level with us sharing this data publicly and with state policymakers over the next few weeks. Yeah.
Discussion about this? Okay, all in favor of sharing this information? Legislature, Governor's Office, leadership, all of them.
Yeah, and then the last thing that I'll do here, then I'll turn over to Justin, and then we do need to come back to items 3 and 4. And then I can do the executive director in 1 minute. So the items 3 and, we'll come back to 3 and 4. So the other 2 quick things, retail incentives, we referenced it briefly at LPC. The Representative Schultz version is out, but I want to publicly acknowledge Mayor Ramsey. She was the lone no vote on the UEOC, but she advocated for cities, explained in detail the position that the league board took a couple of weeks ago. I've been working on an additional draft to try to merge the Vickers concepts, met with retailers and some of the commercial developers, trying to get particularly that housing piece right, so that if mixed use is still in an allowable use for retail incentives, that it actually results in housing units. Because right now I've yet to find a developer who said to me, the language in Schultz's bill will result in housing units. They've all said we can't build to that. So it's an exception that's meaningless, and it doesn't get the outcome that many state leaders would like to see. So that's just the quick check in there. No real new information, but I expect that bill to start moving. So stay tuned. The other thing I'll reference, Molly in the room. Molly Can you give just a quick 1-minute update on the dialogue around the homelessness mitigation fund? Because we brought that to the board before and we had President Niederhauser here in August.
Oh, 2 mics, 1 mic.
Oh, look
I
at
think
that.
1 mic
All right.
should be fine. Certainly. So we have been meeting with Wayne Niederhauser's team at the department or with the Office of Homeless Services, as well as with the big 5 HRC cities in trying to figure out what changes to the homeless mitigation fund might look like as far as eligibility and distribution with the hopefully new $5 million. So there's been a lot of moving parts with that, a lot of people who want different things, but we're working on that and we're meeting with them again on Friday. And so we're hoping to have some more progress on that soon.
Perfect. Thank you, Molly. What I've asked Nick to put up here on the screen is in years past, we've heard feedback from the membership of League needs to be more proactive, try to get in front of issues, not just react to issues at the legislature. And so this is just a quick summary of all of the bills and concepts that have come from League members that we have been trying to put forward, in part in the case of housing and SB 34 plus, to make sure we were at the table before any sort of mandate started coming down the path on us. So you can see this is a snapshot ranging from appropriations that this board has already endorsed to other bills that we are actively working on. Whether they'll all pass or not is a different question. Let's check back in March. But there are a lot of moving parts, and this doesn't include, we're already tracking what, Justin, 50 bills that have popped up? Yeah, just, and remember, it's day 2. So we're trying to stay on top of the bills that are coming, and there'll be more to come. Justin, do you want to take anything? Do you want to give a quick update on water? I think everybody was at LPC, but just to remind people what we need.
Is that on? Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah, the couple of things I want to talk about. There's only really one thing I want to talk about with water, and I just love to get feedback and input. And it's the turf bills. There's 2 bills already out there: HB 121 from Representative Spenlove and HB 95 from Representative Ward. And in both cases, the basic gist of the bill is a prohibition on cities, counties, HOAs, depending on how far they want to go, a prohibition from requiring turf. Now, it's not necessarily across the board. There's different variances, but that's the general idea in both of the bills, is either prohibiting requiring turf or a prohibition on prohibiting xeriscaping, a prohibition on a prohibition. So would love to get feedback and thoughts on that. As I mentioned, if you were an LPC, I talked to Representative Spenlove. He's open for discussion on this one. He's not saying this is my bill, we don't want to talk about it. The big question is really, how do we define non-functional turf? That's really what we're talking about here is, again, not a legal description, but it's still my favorite description, is turf you only walk over when you're mowing it. How do we deal with that? What do we do there? And talking to Representative Ward today, he said his goal, and I don't know if Gary, if you've had any discussions with him, but Representative Ward said he doesn't want to make it so you can't enforce your ordinances, except for changing this one part. So yeah, Gary, I'd love to hear what you've heard from Representative Ward, but then love any feedback on thoughts about this and the right approach on this one.
Yay, local officials day. He got cornered by our elected officials, and then he got cornered by staff at our table. He did say that it wasn't his intention to keep us from being able to enforce our ordinances. And he also, as I spoke to him after, said that he was open also to having language that would require cities to have, prohibit cities from having turf only as an option. In other words, they have to provide at least another option besides turf only. So we're going to go down the path of drafting some language for him he could look at that would say that cities have to provide more than
something
turf only as an option.
And as a reminder, in our bill, the water and land bill, that's HB or SB 110, it's called Water as part of the general plan. This is the bill that we worked on through LPC, through subgroups. We are asking cities to look at their general plan and find other options other than turf. So that seemed like that's in line with our approach. His is obviously a direct ordinance change and shift, whereas we're saying, let's look at this in the general plan But that's good to know. He's willing to talk on that one as well. Any other, yeah, Mayor Sherp.
Obviously, and he knows it was written as a very broad bill that doesn't take into code enforcement of any sort. I mean, it just flat out says you can't force them to maintain it. Well, if you can't, we're in trouble. Adding HOAs in there, it will, that is so dangerous on his part, and he's got to understand that that's a private entity. And so to say that, you know, a city can't enforce it and a county can't enforce it, that's reasonable. To say that an HOA who chooses what their neighborhood will look like can't say that, that's, I think his bill has some ultimate failure if that's the case, because you're going to get sued, and the lawsuits that come from that are almost indefensible. I mean, it's just, how do you, me telling my neighbor his yard looks terrible and it's okay because the city says, you know, state law says you can't make me maintain it. But my HOA that's in place says now I can't complain. That's, yeah, it doesn't.
Right. Any other thoughts or comments on this one? We want to engage with both legislators on this. Representative Wilcox has also mentioned that he wants to run something in this space. The way he explained it to us was basically, you can't say you can't zero-scape. Again, prohibitions on prohibitions. But yeah, so that's great, Gary. If you guys are working on that, we want to keep engaging on this one. We've got to figure out what Nevada has done is they've put in their law a prohibition on non-functional turf, but then they built in time because no one really knows what that is or what the right definition is for that. So I think that's one of the discussion points to have as well is, you know, let's get some time to work on this, not just do this blanket ban. I know, you know, Sean, down in your area, they're looking at a lot of this stuff anyway. There's a lot of discussions going on.
Zero-scape in St. George will be quite different than zero-scape out here. So we would really resist that. Now, we're not against anything that's getting rid of any requirements that you put. When you say turf, for us, turf is big lawn. So real grass, we have nothing, we don't oppose that. But what we're going towards more is having a square footage maximum for real grass in your yard, and the rest will be made up with other types of vegetation that we will take out 5 years growth and then count that percentages.
Okay. And I think that's a great point is, yeah, we want to get these different, we don't want the blanket. We say it all the time, one size fits all. We want to make sure that we're giving you the tools that you need for your area. So.
I want to make sure that those cities that have loud ethnic-based ordinances, that those are accepted. So because we need to irrigate to a certain extent because of biodiversity. We don't want that to be left out.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a great point. All right, we don't need to take any specific action on this. We'll have the bills, we'll bring those up, but just want to get input and feedback, and we've got room to work there and room to talk. So thank you all.
Okay, so the last thing is, this is what we know so far that's coming our way in terms of concerning bills and issues. We'll be tracking that list. What I put in blue is because they may be concerning, they may not be concerning, depending on what ultimately ends up in there. What I put in orange on the permits piece is the bill we fought off last year. We are anticipating to come back about the one size fits all approach on permits. Is Mayor Dane still on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Mayor. Thanks for copying us on your email exchange around municipal power and IPA and everything that's been happening there. Has UDOT reached out to you about the railroad issue?
Well, we're in litigation with them. I hear from the city attorney that UDOT is considering settling with kind of coming up with a statewide fee per intersection, but I mean, that's not our preference, but at least we would have some set amount rather than this ridiculous they can raise it anytime they want, as much as they want. There's no cap that they were proposing in the contract they sent to us.
Perfect. Yeah, UDOT reached out to us last week to put that one on our radar and mention Logan specifically. So I told her I'd make sure to touch base with you about it today. So if
And there
any-
are other cities affected as well.
Right. She gave us a list of Delta and Spanish Fork and others. But are there any other issues that board members are aware of? Anything that legislators in your areas are running, or anything affecting cities that you want to make sure is on our radar?
Just keep doing what you're doing.
Perfect. In that case, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you to do that and those two pieces, and then I'll wrap up with 1 minute at the end.
Awesome.
I'm so optimistic we'll end on time.
Oh, we're going to bust it out. We are. But I don't want to go any further without taking the opportunity while we've got them here to ask all of you to join me in thanking the staff for all of their efforts on Local Officials Day today. I mean, really, today was very well done and challenging, even as a Friday, late Friday. They're all having these discussions about what are we even going to do? You know, can we still have it? What do we need to do to have it? Will people come? Is it safe to have it? What are we going to do? What's it going to mean if we don't? Can it be rescheduled? All the work. Besides all of the work that went into putting it together and pulling it off. Thank you. Very well done. Thank you. Especially, yeah, Katie, really, thank you. Thank you. Everybody, just so awesome. And I got so much good feedback today. A lot of good feedback from the youth and from council members, from lots of people I didn't even know. They really loved today. So yeah, and thank you all for being here, but you guys did awesome. Okay, we're going to turn to Mayor Silvestrini because he's our first vice president and oversees our nominations committee. And we've got 2 board vacancies, and we've got in your packets is how we fill those, right? And what our bylaws say, the processes for filling those. So we're going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. And can everybody hear this okay? Yes. So I want to say too, I mean, Mayor Ramsey and Cam and I kind of had a conversation on Friday about whether to cancel Local Officials Day and the risk on that. And I think we made the right call. So I think it turned out really well. So thank you. And thanks to the staff that made that possible. So, if some board members may recall at our last meeting, we had a discussion about replacing 2 still vacant board seats. These seats were vacated by virtue of the fact that that we had some board members either not seek reelection or not attain reelection. And so we filled one of those vacancies with Mayor Monson. I'm glad that we did that. The other 2, I brought forward some nominations based upon discussions that we had at the nominations committee. And the board voted to table those appointments at that time. And I think really there was a request to reopen the nominations process. And so I kind of asked staff to go through our bylaws, like, is that doable? How would it work? And the memo that is in the packet basically is the product of that. And it basically says there is no procedure under our bylaws to reconstitute the nominating committee until we have our annual meeting. And so I'm just going to say that based upon the qualifications of the 2 people that I mentioned, which is Mayor Tammy Tran from Kaysville and Marcia White, who is a council member from Ogden, I'm going to put those nominations back in front of this body just so we fill those seats. I'll just say that with respect to that, the whole process here, these are 2 individuals who applied to be board members. And we haven't received anything else from anybody else that I'm aware of where anybody else has said, I want to be a board member from one of the jurisdictions that was expressing the concern. I know that these candidates, Marcia White served on the board. She was a contributor. You know, I had some difficult conversations with her and with Mayor Tran, who's Mayor Tammy Tran from Kaysville is the other person that I nominated. You know, kind of explaining why this was taking so long or what was happening, you know, and I'm not suggesting the board should act based upon my sense of personal embarrassment about having to talk to them about this, but frankly, it's awkward. And these are 2 highly qualified candidates, and I renominate them and would urge the board to appoint them.
Thank you. I'm going to before I ask for discussion or a motion, I'm going to support that very much. This is right in line with our process. This is how it's spelled out. This is how it's done. And we had some good discussion before. But this is all in line with how things have been done. And so I'm very supportive of that. And I'm going to ask if there's a motion.
I'll make that motion. I wholeheartedly support that. When these two, they're interim appointments, correct? So they're.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mayor Shepherd and a second by Mayor Monson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of appointing Mayor Tammy Tran of Kaysville and Marcia White, council member in Ogden City, to the ULCT board representing their respective areas, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Please tell them congratulations and we welcome them. We're grateful for their service. All right, Liam, where's Liam? Okay, take it away. We're just gonna have you take it away with our boards and commissions.
Okay, thank you. There is a vacancy on the Procurement Policy Board that is to be filled by the League. It consists of 15 members, of which one is a representative of a city or town appointed by the Utah League of Cities and Towns. Brian Hemsley represented the League for years until his retirement at the end of August 2021. It was recommended to staff to consider Christopher Jennings the new procurement officer for Salt Lake City. He has extensive knowledge of both the procurement code and the administrative rule, the rule written and implemented by the Procurement Policy Board. So it is staff's recommendation that the board appoint Christopher Jennings to the Procurement Policy Board.
I'll make a motion to nominate Christopher Jennings to the Procurement Board.
I didn't even hear what just happened after Liam just spoke. Sorry. And I don't know who's keeping track of that. I always make a backup copy, but if you got that, we have a motion and a second. Okay.
Great.
To the appointment of the Salt Lake City's Christopher Jennings, right? Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Mayor. Liam, as part of his duties, is taking over our boards and commissions tracking. We appoint more than 40 individuals to boards and commissions. Actually, now it's over 50 individuals to state boards and commissions. Kate Bradshaw, for example, Councilmember Bradshaw is one of the league reps on the Outdoor Recreation or Outdoor Adventure Commission. And Mayor Ramsey on the UEOC. And so Liam's basically going through the whole spreadsheet post-election, post-retirements to figure out what needs to be updated. So expect a slew of names in the spring. That was the one that we needed to get filled because it was time sensitive, but the rest will hopefully be filled in March. So Mayor, if it's all right, I'll do my executive director report. Go to the last slide. Oh, actually, Nick, that's right. I forgot one thing. There you go.
All right, sorry to be the person going at 4 o'clock. But this is just to throw it out there to all board members. We do have a new treasurer, Mayor Brett Hales, who's joined us via Zoom. He is the chair of our Finance and Audit Committee. The other member on that committee was Councilmember Clint Smith, who is no longer on the board. So we need to, this is soliciting some volunteers to serve on our Finance and Audit Committee. What that entails is you'll get the quarterly reports before the board once those are ready to look over and comment on at the board meeting. And when we go to bid for audit, you will be the group that will be making that recommendation of what auditor we use for our annual audit to the board. So the board itself doesn't have to do any action right now, but I do want everyone to know, let me know if you're interested in serving on that Finance and Audit Committee. We do need at least one more other than Mayor Hales to be a member on there. So that I'm just throwing that out there to everyone.
So if you are interested, just drop Nick a quick note, and then we'll follow up with board members too via email. So the last thing on the executive director report, Nick, you just pulled that last slide. One piece of that is a scheduling. I actually had made. Okay, so first is just a quick outreach request for you as board members, particularly off the Wasatch Front. Mayor Ramsey and I are planning to do our engagement tour once the session is over. Mayor Ramsey's made it a priority to engage with as many newly electeds as possible. So we could use your help in identifying the times of COGS and COM meetings around the state. And so we'll send a follow-up email because we want to build a master calendar to make it easier for us to build our travel outreach in order to meet with our members. So COGS, COMS, AOGs, that's not just off the Wasatch Front, but it's really statewide. Every county does it a little bit differently. And Angela, Adam on our team will be the point person building that master calendar for our engagement efforts. Our Deputy Director, Rachel Terry, you met her online in December. She will start officially at the end of the month. She was wrapping up some cases in the Attorney General's office. Between now and March 4th, we'll have weekly officer calls. We'll have LPC weekly. We'll have our daily briefing. We'll have regular strategy sessions. The board is not scheduled to meet between now and March. That's intentional. We get the general direction from the board, and then we work closely with the officers, and then that daily briefing. So if any board members want to be involved in the daily briefings or have staff members involved in daily briefings, let us know. Those will start tomorrow. Then the rest of the spring, hallelujah, right? National League of Cities is on. So several of your cities have participated in that in the past. That will occur March 14th through the 16th. We host a dinner there, and we also often arrange for visits with the congressional delegation. We will then next meet as a board on Monday, March 28th. You will get an updated calendar invite today or tomorrow, because we were on the 30th, but we needed to reschedule that to accommodate my Ramsey schedule. And that'll be in South Jordan. So we're trying to do board meetings in presidential cities. The pandemic interfered with that last year, but going forward, that's what we intend to do. And then we'll be in St. George for mid-year. And those are really where you do your strategic planning and really set the stage for the interim. And then we'll have the budget hearings in May and in June.
Thank you for being willing to move to March 28th. My youngest daughter's 16th birthday on March 30th, which is when we were supposed to have it. And I don't want to spend that day any other way than however she wants to spend it. So thank you for being willing to move that day.
Aren't you just gonna give her the car keys and tell her to go wherever she wants to go?
I'll be lucky if she gives me any time that day, but I have in case she wants to go lunch or something.
I'm just gonna press the camera for South Jordan presidential city.
And that was recorded. Can somebody send me a copy of that clip? I'm going to just make that my little ringtone or something.
Well, the last thing on the scheduling piece is we'll be asking you to revisit the strategic goals that are in the packet. So again, you'll get some emails following up on that about advocacy, engagement, and operations. The last thing related to dues is we are working closely with the Statewide Association of Prosecutors. I hope to have had more time to explain this, but the 30-second version is this. Historically, SWAP got most of their funding through the county, through Salt Lake County. That funding stream is drying up. We partner a lot with them. They came to us to ask if we could help them financially. Initially, they actually went to the Municipal Attorneys Association to ask the attorneys if their cities would contribute. And then they came to us and we said, well, actually, we should just have a partnership here rather than SWAP looking for extra dollars from cities. Let's see if there's a way to fold the Association of Prosecutors, the city portion of it, within the league. So that's something we will be tackling over the next few weeks to come back with a recommendation in the spring, and you'll be adopting the dues in the spring as well. So sorry, Mary, it took more than 1 minute, but a lot of other pieces beyond the session that we're staying on top of, but we've got 44 and a half, 41 and a quarter days to go.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Anybody have anything else we didn't cover? I have no idea.
Yeah, lunch. It'll be
12 o'clock, I think, yeah.
Likely go tomorrow with a few other.
Yeah, we'll be excited to welcome all of you to South Jordan. Thanks for your willingness to come out. It's the only moment we'll ever be a presidential city, that one lunch. So, you know, anyway, all right. I have a funny story about that. I do have a sash that says mayor on it that they ordered on purpose for me, which of course I have never used, nor will I ever use, but I do have one. You're welcome to borrow it. Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion in second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for this whole day, for all of your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.